'Tis the season to shine with H&M. Discover the holiday collection and find fashionable pieces for your wardrobe or for under the tree. Get inspired and dazzle with this year's glam. From tuxedo styles, bow detailed pieces, impressive prints, and more. From unforgettable looks to unforgettable gifts. With fashion finds to home decor, find it all at H&M. Treat your loved ones and yourself this season. Shop in-store or at hm.com.
This episode is brought to you by Vital Farms. Isn't it bullshit to have to question where your food comes from? At Vital Farms, you can trace your pasture-raised eggs all the way back to the source, the pasture. On the side of each pasture-raised carton of eggs, you'll find the name of the farm where your eggs were laid. And when you look the farm up on their website, you'll get a peek at all the sunshine, fresh air, and open space the hens enjoy. Learn more and find out where to buy them at vitalfarms.com. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit-free.
This episode is brought to you by Klaviyo, the platform that powers smarter digital relationships. With Klaviyo, you can activate all your customer data in real time, connect seamlessly with your customers across all channels, guide your marketing strategy with AI-powered insights, recommendations, and automated assistance, deliver experiences that feel individually designed at scale, and grow your business faster. Power smarter digital relationships with Klaviyo. Learn more at klaviyo.com/Spotify. That's KLAVIYO.com/Spotify.
Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Dr. Donte Vaughn, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
Today, we're going to talk about reassessing your organizational values at work. Values congruence, work job fit, work organization fit. All of these pieces are super important to having successful teams, successful leaders, and successful organizations. And it all rests on values and really understanding those first and foremost. So that's what we're going to explore and try to unpack together today. As we get started, I just wanted to briefly introduce Dr. Donte Vaughn. He is the founder and president of LightPoint Advisors, and I know just recently has gone through some transitions professionally. Maybe you can share a little bit more about that with us and give us a little bit more background and personal context.
Sure. So I recently transitioned from the role of Chief Executive Officer for a company called CultureWorks, which was dedicated to helping organizations navigate what we call culture performance management, how their organizations mobilize their leaders around their engagement, their interaction, their decision-making. And it was born out of my partners and our vision as it related to operationalizing how organizations actually seek to define, implement, manage, and ultimately improve company culture. When I say company culture, leadership culture, right? So CultureWorks had a lot of success in that work and luckily was acquired. So I was able to then take the success and kind of spin off LightPoint Advisors as a hyper-focused consultancy, still in the areas of workforce management, but also leaning more heavily into IO psychology and organizational development, some of the things that are niche to my expertise and what I do. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that background. And let's just dive on in. You do an important work, and I really like the focus on better understanding values as a foundational piece. Because, when we think about successful organizations, successful teams, and successful leaders, it's all built on trust in relationships. And trust and relationships are built on shared values. So we talk about trust all the time, but it's hard to develop trust and meaningful reciprocal relationships and meaningful relationships unless you have a clear a real clarity around values. And so understanding what those are and being able to assess them and even reassess them is vital. That's not a skill set most people have. Whether it's just like the grind of the day to day and people running around like crazy trying to do every last little thing that is on their plate, or maybe just you haven't really built or exercised that self-reflective muscle, or whatever the case may be. There's a variety of reasons why this doesn't often happen. And so then you find a lot of really well-meaning, well-intentioned individuals seemingly beating their head up against the wall day in and day out, not because they're up against other nefarious bad people, but because you have a bunch of really well-intentioned, well-meaning people all working at odds instead of working collaboratively and congruently towards the same ends, because they don't even know what those ends are. Maybe start to frame up for us like how you can start to approach this when you're dealing with teams in that kind of a situation.
John, what we find is organizations have to first start with recognizing core values for that organization is foundational to their capacity to fulfill their purpose, their vision, their mission as an organization. It's not just a marketing exercise. It should not just be window dressing. Your core values become the framework by which everyone engages and interacts and makes decisions in the business every day. You have to start there, because if you don't place that level of importance around your core values, then it's going to be difficult to do what I share next, which is how do you start to be intentional and ensuring that those values are actionable, and then driving accountability around those core values, right? It's nice to say that these core values are important to us and we believe in transparency, or we believe in inclusion, or we believe in these things. It's another thing to actually build a system and a process around those core values because you believe they're so essential to your business. So start recognizing that becomes an important step, followed by, okay, how do we make those things actionable? How do we start to put the right systems and processes in place by which we can hold one another accountable?
Yeah, and the systems and processes, that's what it really comes down to. Because again, I mean, there are people that I think need some education, and they need to learn a little bit and expand the aperture of their understanding. No doubt that needs to happen. Discussions, trainings, those things need to happen. But I think most people are recognizing that they want a positive, healthy organizational culture. They understand the value of an inclusive work environment. I think most people share some of those core values. The problem is getting past the lip service of it, getting past the performative aspects of it to actual structural, systematic, policies, practices, and procedures within the organization. That almost never happens. That's like the real hard work of institutionalizing, all of these values. So we can espouse great values, and I'm all for espousing values, and I'm all for having aspirational goals. But unless you can start to create mechanisms to reinforce it, you're just never going to get past the aspiration.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, oftentimes some of my upfront work with my clients begins with an evaluation of, okay, why do you exist, i.e. purpose? What do you think this existence is going to lead you to, or where it's going to take you or your organization, or your clients or what have you? Okay, vision. Okay, then what have you set out to do to ensure you realize the vision that will help you lean into that purpose? And once we clear that up, then we say, okay, what are the behavioral standards and expectations that you believe is essential for your organization to realize purpose, vision, mission? Now, notice I said behavioral standards and expectations. And sometimes an organization has to start from the end in mind, meaning, what have you observed in all of the successes that you've experienced in your organization? What have you observed behaviorally that has led to those successes, from an engagement, from an interaction, from a decision-making point of view? Because sometimes starting from the end in mind and working backwards will help you start to identify or synthesize thematically, okay, these are the behaviors that have led to our success. Okay, now let's classify them. And what you may find is there's a disconnect between what you thought were your core values or essential to your business versus what's
Hmm.
actually leading to your success, right? Speaking to those ideological values because you think that's what the marketplace wants to hear, you're going to be held to that, right? So having integrity behind those values becomes essential. So let's start with what is actually driving your success. Now, if there are different additional values that you want to lean into to help really optimize or maximize your leadership culture, then we can talk about those things. But let's start from the successes you've already experienced. Similarly, what are the behaviors you've observed that are unbecoming to your ability to realize the purpose or the vision or the mission you have for your organization? Let's talk about those as well. So sometimes working backwards it helps in starting to get the right language. Now, once we get some clarity around that, then it's okay. What does it actually mean to show up that way in the organization? What are the examples that are indicative of your embodiment or your leader's embodiment of those core values? Let's be really clear because the more prescriptive we are, the more we can now look at points of integration and your other standards within the business, from your job descriptions all the way to your interview protocols and the line of questioning you have around the validation of their capacity to exhibit those behaviors that tie to your values, all the way down to your performance reviews. All these become systematic integration points where you can say, my core values matter to the extent that I've ingrained them into how I measure not only my organization's success, but your success and your capacity, regardless of your technical aptitude. There's a measure of the embodiment of these values as essential to our business's success.
And again, it's just recognizing that we have to fundamentally take a good, long, hard look at what those values are and if they align. And I think we all kind of have the assumption that they do. And to your point, if you really take that long, hard look, you start to notice that they don't. Like there's just misalignment, and there's all sorts of energy and activities and resources that are going towards things that don't fit with your core purpose or your mission or your foundational values at all. Which means you either need to pivot and redirect, or you need to like actually shift what your core values are so they're in better alignment, or maybe a combination, right? And so all of that I think is really well stated and just so essential as we try to run effective teams. Culture will happen. If we're not intentional about it, it will just organically emerge. Anytime you get more than a couple people together, a culture will start to develop. And so even the smallest founding team will have a culture develop. And if you're not really intentional about what you want that to be and the core values driving that culture, it will happen to you instead of you being able to shape what you want and having, that healthy type of culture that most people say that they do want. All of a sudden you get past the founding team. It's one thing when you're a small little group and you can just hash things out and have conversations. And now you have a dozen people, 24 people, 50, 100, 1,000 plus people. And you can't do that anymore. Like you have to have the systems in place. Otherwise it's just not going to happen. And that's where you get all sorts of, negative unintended consequences that nobody would want for their team or for their organization or for the consumer. But they happen, and they happen consistently because we aren't really purposeful about making sure we're driving the type of culture and the values that feed into that culture.
You bet. I mean, if you treat your values just like my co-author and I talk about in our book, From Culture to Culture, we established this methodology as a framework to enable leaders to actually more operationalize how they approach driving this leadership culture. There's 7 pillars. The first pillar is the value system, right? Because that's essential. That's, to your point, foundational. If you treat those values like a marketing exercise or like window dressing to your business, if you treat it like an engagement or an initiative versus a requirement for how you operate, then it's going to be difficult to really drive ownership and accountability, right? You can't manage what you can't measure, and it's ensuring that includes measuring how people are actually embodying those core values in a real and tangible way in the business. And that's more difficult. I challenge organizations when you talk about these core values that you claim, it, how critical are they to you? Would it be to the extent that you can take your top sales executive who's generating 25% of your revenue for your organization? Are you prepared to either have conversations with that individual around their successful or unsuccessful embodiment of those core values, how they need to nurture their development behaviorally around the embodiment of those core values, and the consequences to failure to do so, right? How, are they that essential to your business that you're willing to have that conversation?
Mm.
Are they that essential that you are willing to take these legacy individuals in your organization who do not represent the future state of where you're trying to take your organization or the workplace culture? Are you willing to have those conversations and say, listen, we've evolved and your behavior is no longer in alignment with the core values that we believe are essential to take us, carry us into the future? How important are they to you? And hey, I don't have an ideological view that I force upon my client partners. I just say, listen, just have integrity behind whatever you think is important,
Right.
because then we can mobilize people. People will rally behind the things that they connect with. Even from a talent acquisition standpoint, you can start to be more intentional, and that has subsequent implications really on your build from a retention standpoint and productivity standpoint. Hey, I want to vet your alignment on the basis of how we've chosen to engage and interact and make decisions in our business every day. This is why we see individuals who, after the fact, realize this isn't a fit, right? So I really believe that the significant disconnect starts from the top, from the senior most leaders, from founder on down, in terms of driving ownership and accountability around what these values actually mean to the business, not what you think the marketplace wants to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. Be true. Again, with no ideological dogma behind it, right? Like whatever you feel is important, be true to that, and be consistent with that. That's what we're looking for. And, I have my own opinions about what I think those values should be, but
Sure.
it's not for me to tell you, but you got to,
Sure.
you got to be honest with yourself and with your team and have those conversations, and then be committed and have the integrity to be true to those values. That's what we're talking about.
You bet.
And that's just so important. You mentioned just one more thing we can touch on really quickly. You mentioned kind of the IO psych component of all the stuff that you do. I'm wondering how you find that in your work with clients, how you find that feeding into the ability to successfully reassess organizational values.
We're still talking about human behavior. We're still talking about the dynamics that shape workplace culture, right? And how individuals engage and interact and make decisions. So if core values are foundational to those behavioral standards and expectations, they become the common language, right? The values we share, the language we use, the behaviors we display, the connections we make. That's as simple as I can define organizational culture. And at the end of the day, when we're bringing people together, and the factors that influence the engagement of those individuals, right? It all still interconnects through an IO psych a lens, right? And understanding the complexities behind that. Now imagine, organizations can't just fire everyone because they have this new set of core values with behavioral standards, right? We have to navigate the complexities of what that looks like. Maybe I never held my organization, or to your point, I have multiple subcultures. I never quite mobilize my organization collectively around a core culture. Now I'm trying to head that way, which are most of my clients, right?
Yeah.
So then it's, how do I help them make the organizational shift through the change management lens and through the learning and development lens, all the other factors that requires some unpacking, because I'm trying to change human behavior on an individual level and a team-based level, right? And how they work together, how they interact, and bringing awareness to their tendencies, right? And how that drives either success or failure. So there's a significant work, I don't know if overlap's the right word, but there's synergy in the work we do in the IO psych realm, as it pertains to that, organizational, from a diagnostic standpoint, from a behavioral change standpoint.
Yeah, well said. Well, this has just been a really great conversation. The time has flown. I wish I had like another half hour to talk with you, but I know at the time I need to let you go here in just a minute, Donte. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Sure. Anyone can leverage the, LinkedIn or any of the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter. If you search Dr. Donte Vaughn, if you search LightPoint Advisors, you should be able to find us. Our website, lightpointadvisors.com. We're currently enhancing that platform. LinkedIn, if you just search Dr. Donte Vaughn or LightPoint Advisors, you'll be able to find us there. And there's a lot of thought leadership content, blogs and podcasts, all centered around exactly what we're talking about. And I would leave your audience with, just some encouragement, as it relates to this conversation and core values and how to start to mobilize organization. Ask the key decision makers in your organization, if you're not already one, what's going to be essential for us to continue to thrive as an organization as it relates to how we all engage and interact and make decisions every day, and be really honest and truthful with yourselves around what you believe to be essential. And from there, you're always going to tie back to that the common language, that you all share relative to your core values, and that's where a lot of the work begins. So don't ignore this, because I think it's to your point at the start, right? It's essential to all of the human relationships that exist in our business. So let's start to have those deeper conversations.
Yeah, I love it. Donte, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Donte and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.